Welcome back to another session of relevant and relational. On this episode, we're talking about weird windfalls. I can't quite do it justice in my head, like what I imagine this voice would be like, but it would be some version of that. So today we are talking about windfalls, and I liked the alliteration of like weird windfalls, but these may not be weird. These might just be windfalls that were unexpected. And for advisors, like, how can you help clients when they receive a windfall and they need to talk to their adult children about it? But also for if clients, for those of you that are watching this, if you receive a windfall, maybe through the sale of a business, through an inheritance, and maybe it was expected, maybe it wasn't. Talking to your adult kids can be really difficult. And so today, Meg, let's dive in and talk a little bit about maybe some helpful tips and what's helpful to think about or to remember, because I think this is becoming more and more common, wouldn't you say?
Well, I mean, with the great wealth transfer afoot, that somewhere between 70 and 90 trillion dollars are going to be passing well, first to the probably to the surviving spouse, oftentimes the female, and then after that passing down to subsequent generations. Even though we talk a lot about this, and certainly in financial planning, this comes up a lot because we're usually talking about or talking to high net worth, ultra high net worth families. But it's important to note that like this wealth transfer is deeply unequally divided, that like 50 of this money, the 70 to 90 trillion, is really only going to like 2% of households. I think the average bequest that boomers like intend to or could possibly leave behind, the average inheritance is projected to be less than 50%. And this is being drug up by some of these ultra high net worth families that are going to be leaving millions, if not more than that, to subsequent generations. So there's a lot to be. Probably only somewhere between 20 and 30% of boomers will actually leave some sort of an inheritance. Again, most of the time being less than $50,000 to their families. I think windfalls are in that, even though we maybe talk about it a lot in financial planning, and certainly our jobs, people ask us about it a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it actually doesn't happen a lot. And I think this is probably why people oftentimes have a lot of questions about it, because how many people do we know that you probably don't know? Most of your friends probably are not gonna like have an inheritance, how to think about that. And there are again many things that can make it weird in the sense that, sure, I mean, you mentioned that sometimes we know that it's coming, and lately IPOs have been in the news, and so SpaceX people are apparently going to be making a lot of money, maybe Anthropic or something like this. So sometimes we have an idea that it's coming. And then other times, like great auntie, I don't know, Carolina dies and you didn't know that she was sitting on millions, and she didn't tell you that she was sitting on millions. And now you get some of that. So it can be weird in that way. It can also be weird even as a windfall, even though you know about it. Having some friction in your life, people like to think, oh, I just want to be able to do whatever I want. I get that. I get that we like this idea. But in reality, this is actually, most people are very unhappy when that happens, or they can be unhappy for any numbers of reasons why that happens. So we need some amount of friction. It's not a horrible thing to like have a budget and have limits and be able to think through trade-offs and things like that. And when that doesn't apply anymore, again, like even if you knew that you were going to go through the IPO, going from being somebody that makes a good living, making a few $100,000 a year, you would have eventually had a few $1 million when you retire. But now, you just have $10 million, like all of a sudden. This is quite weird, even when you have planned for it. And so all those things, I think in one way or another, we're going to talk about today.
I'm wondering from a starting place, because we both have kind of mapped out here are some scenarios that could happen. Here's also just this greater, like higher level framing for what is going on in the world of finances, personal finances, inheritance, like windfall, like this great wealth transfer. When I interviewed Jim Grubman on this topic for the podcast, he did this like Mike Myers, the pinky like thing. And so I just want to say a shout out to Jim Grubman because now anytime I hear a great wealth transfer, I just think of like his like face and like him like doing this. And it makes me laugh and it makes me smile
Yeah.
so much thinking about that.
$1 million.
Right, right. Anyway, I digress. His work has been really helpful just in shaping this and understanding it. So if you're interested in just knowing more about that, again, whether you're an advisor or client, check out Dr. Jim Grubman, his work.
His
But
most recent book, Wealth 3.0, super great book.
super, super great book. But we've talking about kind of high level, like what's happening here. Here are some examples of like windfalls that maybe they're unexpected or maybe they are kind of expected, but it's just like I knew this was coming and it still feels like uncomfortable, like weird. Just what do I do with this? So I'm thinking here mostly if we can define a little bit more of who we're talking about is generally what I see, what happens is it's the what we call the G1, right? So this
Yeah.
older parent kind of
They have
generation.
one. Yeah.
Right. They have received this. And then the question is like, how do I talk to my adult children about this? Where do I start? Like, what does that look like? Before we dive in, like, I just want to validate that this is a difficult topic, especially if you really weren't anticipating it.
This is the thing about money that you and I have certainly talked about, that certainly both of us have studied. It doesn't really matter, like to the point of like the great wealth transfer and only how, 2% of the population is really going to get most of this. Even if you are passing along $10,000 as opposed to passing along $100,000, as opposed to passing along 10, $1 million, whatever it is a weird thing to talk about. And there can be shame, there can be stress, there can be guilt, there can be grief, regardless of the amount. If you're an advisor listening to this, it doesn't matter how much they could potentially pass on, it's still going to be a difficult
Good
conversation.
point.
If you're just a person listening to this and you're thinking, I'm going to be passing wealth down the line, in some way, shape, or form, and I just don't even know how to begin to have that conversation. Yeah, what we're going to talk about today is still going to be relevant, regardless of which side of the table you're on here. Like this is a very difficult conversation to have.
So I think what I'd like to start by just kind of opening up and sharing is that for a lot of clients and even advisors, sometimes there's anxiety around how do I talk about this because it encapsulates so much. And so what I like to say is let's not put so much pressure on one conversation because it is not just one conversation. This is one of many conversations that will be had. And if we can go ahead and accept that this isn't just one conversation. There will be many, likely smaller conversations along the way. Then we can take a little bit of the pressure off for needing to figure it all out in one 60-minute sit
Yes,
down
but
conversation. Or I've got to hurry up and like share like everything. And so if we say, okay, I accept that this will be one of many conversations, then maybe where do we start? It makes the starting point you could start with however it's like getting into a pool is kind of how I say it. Like, how do you like to get into a pool? Some people like to just jump in, right? And maybe conversationally that looks like, hey, Cam, Abby, those are my kids. Like I would say, hey, Cam, Abby, your dad and I, we've sold our businesses. We sold Beyond the Plan, we sold AP Wealth, and we've got about $50 billion. If I am of the kind of mindset or the personality that I like to just get in the pool, jump in the deep end and like lay it on you, I'd be like, Cam, Abby, hey, your dad and I, like we've sold our businesses. You might know that. You know that we've sold our businesses. And we were fortunate enough to be able to sell those businesses. And what we have received, the windfall, however you want to frame it, right, is approximately 50 billion. And maybe you don't want to name the number, I don't know, but you could just say, like it is a substantial amount of money that we are still trying to figure out, right? But if you like to jump the pool and you like to just kind of rip the band-aid and like get it off, like there's nothing wrong with just coming out the gate and saying that. Now, other people might like to get into the pool, and this is actually how I like to get into the pool, like one kind of like, centimeter at a time, right? Like very slowly, like walk, like into the waters and then really just stop once it gets to like my belly button because it's so painful. I can't go further than that when it's cold. But if you like to slowly get into the waters, then maybe the conversation is, "Hey, Cam and Abs, you guys know that, hey, we want to let you know we've sold our business. Both of us we've sold our businesses and we're in the process of figuring out what that looks like from, a financial standpoint and also from a lifestyle standpoint. And we would like to continue to have these smaller conversations along the way as we are figuring things out." That's a lighter way to open the gate. So, I think if I go back, right, to kind of sum up this little part is if we think about this as multiple conversations, there are many ways that you can break this down. And there's nothing that says that you have to just come out of the gate, jump in the deep water and just share everything all at once and have all the answers to this at one time.
Let me ask you this. I think I know what your answer would be, but I thinking of the just jump right in. Do you still think that this is like, oh, so we're having breakfast on a Tuesday, and guess what? We sold our businesses. You had no idea that this was coming. Or do you think that even jumping all the way in, I get it, disclosing whatever it is you want to disclose as soon as possible, that perhaps there could be benefits to that. These are things that you could weigh as a couple or an individual who you want to talk to and their potential ages and things like that. Even that, the planning of the jumping in, like, should we tell people, hey, I'm thinking about being at the pool on Saturday, and but I typically like to jump right in. So is there some expectation setting or just being thoughtful when we make this announcement? Like, would you say, hey, let's go see the financial planner together? There's some stuff I want to talk about. Or if you don't have a financial planner yet and you're just listening to this again, is it the idea that, hey, let's set aside some time? My husband and I, or my partner and I, have made some financial decisions and we want to talk to you about that. When would be a good time? Now we have something on the calendar because I don't necessarily know that it's ever something that you want to announce abruptly. Most people have pretty, we'll just say, complicated feelings about money and money in families. Even if it's good, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's uncomplicated. The discussion about that, even if you are a jump right in person, is there some still consideration to, let's set the expectation, let's have a date, let's have a place, maybe not in either one of your homes, could be neutral ground, the sort of thing, the thinking that might go into that conversation.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Is that what you thought I would say? Yes. Okay, good. Glad we're on the same page. So you're exactly right. There should be some thoughtfulness. I said it as if it was just kind of flippant of like, let's just impulsively like just talk about this and bring this out. But you're right. There should be some thoughtfulness and discussion. And ideally, what would be nice is if this were a discussion between both partners. If you're married, if you're coupled, like it would be a discussion there. And if you are working with an advisor, certainly if you feel like you need to consult with them first and bring them in and just say, hey, I'm thinking about having this conversation. If in a perfect world, if I had a magic wand, I would say the couple should come together and just say, where are we both at as far as our comfortability and sharing? What is like just absolutely necessary like right now, because there might be a lot of things that aren't necessary right now. Are there any like definitive knowables that we can like share, because there might be a lot of things that are not known that maybe it's not worth getting into and talking about because you don't have answers for. And what's the outcome when this conversation ends, when we tell Cam and Abby that, this is what's happening? Like, what do we want for all four of us to be walking away with from either a knowledge place or even just emotionally, like relationally? What do we want to end with? And then if we think about just the ending piece, I think it's easier to like backwards plan. Then, like, okay, well, if we want to leave feeling still connected, we don't want the kids to be very confused or overwhelmed, which I think that is very important. We don't want to overwhelm them. Okay, Abby, she tends to ask a lot of questions like on the spot. Like she likes to have all the answers. Cam's a lot more, analytical. He needs to kind of take something and then go back and think about it. But, we know Abby's likely to, start getting kind of spun up in all the what ifs. Like maybe we want to do a less is more approach. And so at bare minimum, like what's the least, or smallest amount of information that we think we need to share with them at on this particular date and time so that are taking care of both of them and we all are leaving feeling, as best as we can. I think sometimes we don't do a good job of thinking about the end result. We just think about, I just need to tell them this, but we don't think about like where do we want to get to like at the very end. And so I like to encourage couples or advisors like let's think about the end first and then let's work back from there. And certainly we can't know all of the factors. We may not know exactly how like our kids will respond, but generally parents have at least some sort of an idea of is there going to be a child that's more inquisitive that asks a lot of questions, or will they get defensive, or will they be really supportive and like understanding? Like usually as parents we kind of have a little bit of an idea around what type of response there might be. So think about that when we're shaping that. To your point, you said expectations. I think that it is okay to set up the conversation, talk about here is what we are expecting, here are the expectations of this. And we are not going to know all of the answers to all of your questions. There will be more meetings, more conversations about this. So setting up some expectations there. Would you add, you're super great at expectations. Like what other expectations do you think for a couple going into a conversation like this, they would need to consider?
I actually think that you have covered probably everything that I would have said. So if I could summarize back what you said, if you're just a person listening to this, or you were an advisor listening to this and your clients are going through this, step one is to get your clients together. If it's a couple, or even if it's an individual and you are sitting there with them, if you're an individual just listening to this and you don't yet have a financial planner, consider talking to a financial planner. If you don't have a financial planner, talk to your friend. And what you want to consider is, okay, what do I need this person to know, or what is it that I think I might want to share, and how do I want them to feel once we're done having this conversation? I don't want them to be confused. I want them to feel like they can ask questions. I want them to feel that this is a dialogue. That there may be many things that you want them to feel, but I very much like that. We're almost starting at the end of the conversation of what we hope the outcome is going to be. This may give us an indication of, is it okay to jump right in, or is this something that we want to wade into? And the next decision that you want to make is then sort of the expectation setting around this. Again, if this is somebody that you're close to and you have conversations all the time, maybe it's fine to like go to their house or they're at your house and you're having dinner because there's something that you want to talk about. They perhaps know that it's related to a selling of the business, or a great aunt Erna died and we need to talk about, the implications of this for our family. So you are then setting expectations about the place, setting expectations about the time, maybe setting, as you are comfortable, expectations about what you want to talk about and what you want to get done. I think all of that is great. I don't actually know that I would add anything to that. I think the number one thing is with whether you and your partner are getting aligned, because your partner may be a jump in type and you're a waiter type, and
Well, good
you
point.
want to decide ahead of time like what you plan on disclosing. I want to ask you about this. There is this method, it's more of like a medical method that doctors are supposed to use for when they're giving patients like information about their diagnoses. And this method is called ask, tell, ask. I actually learned about this from Rose Zealand, who you and I both
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
And what you're supposed to do as the doctor, you're supposed to say, so what do you know about this disease or this treatment? Or in this situation, you might ask, like, well, what do you know about the sale of the business, or the fact that great aunt Erna has died, or about our estate plan? Like, depending on, again, how often you've had this conversation, or what talking about money is like in your household, you may be able to ask in just an assessment of, where is this person that I'm talking to at? The next step is the tell. So you're going to basically answer whatever they say their question is. So you'll provide information using sort of plain language, if you will, about whatever it is. Oh, maybe they say, well, I know that Aunt Irma has died and I know that you went to the will reading. Or maybe they say, I know that you sold your business and I know that you and dad have been really comfortable. And now maybe you're even like more comfortable, but like, I don't know how much or what that means for me. You may respond to that. Like, yes, Aunt Erna had died. None of us knew that she was so wealthy. And you're right. She has left the family some money. And that's actually one of the things I want to talk about. Or, yes, that we did sell our businesses. You know that our businesses were very good. Now, the last part is back to ask, where you're kind of using ask now to confirm. The doctor, if we're thinking of it like that, ask the patient to explain the information back to them in their own words. So you may say, "You're right about Aunt. Share with me like what else you know," or "Tell me what other questions you have," or "How would you describe that?" These again can be ways to begin the conversation without just like blurting it out and trying to create some engagement. So I'll stop there. You know that I really like questions and somehow magically turn everything into a session on questions. But I feel like it's such a useful
It
technique.
all
It's such a
comes back to
skill.
well,
And this is a good one, I think.
what I like about this is that you summarize kind of this like structure, right? For here are some, what I was sharing earlier, right? Like a step 1, step 2, step 3, right? But then I like this ask, tell, ask because really it's a guide for in the conversation. Like once you get in the conversation, like how to start to begin, like how to have it, a bit of a framework there. And so I like ask, tell, ask. ATA. Shout out Rose Zealand. Thank you for that. And I think that it can be one, I guess a few reasons why I like it is I'm imagining it gives just the opportunity to expand one, just the connection, but also two, I'm thinking emotionally just the experience. And so I'm imagining, right? Like if Cam and Abs are like, well, I know that you sold the business and you guys are kind of comfortable, but I guess, yeah, it's kind of still confusing. Like, what are you doing? You just kind of go off to this island every so often. And daddy just goes off into the woods, like, hunting. So I guess, like, we don't really know a lot other than you sold a business and then you guys got weird. And that's important to know, right? Like,
Right.
okay, like it's confusing. Like this thing has happened and then our behavior changed and now you're confused. I'm sure that's difficult. I'm thinking about this ATA framework like as a really lovely way to be able to talk about just the emotional experience of it as well, clearing up some of the thinking, certainly around like the knowledge, but also to emotionally just understand experientially like what is going on for your kids. And so if there is confusion, one, then you can start to reflect of like, oh, I guess, yeah, like we have been kind of doing that. Oh, and Clayton is growing a beard and disappearing into the woods. And that would be like weird and confusing. I haven't really thought about it from your perception. Like, yeah, we can give you some more context then, right? To be able to help you take this and not necessarily change the emotion, but at least make sense of it in a better
What questions
way.
do you have? What else would be
Right.
helpful to know?
Yes.
And again, this hasn't even yet gotten to like how it affects them. Like it may begin with just understanding the situation at large. And yes, and it could be to the point that you made earlier. This could be in motion for both parties, which I think is a really worthwhile thing to say out loud.
Yeah.
And if you are the person in this conversation acknowledging that, yeah, I guess things have been different. I can understand that does look strange. What questions do you have about that? Or it could be the opposite. Maybe the kids or your family members do know that you've had some sort of a windfall, but you haven't changed your lifestyle. And maybe they have questions about that. It's not
Yeah.
really people know that money changes people. And so when it doesn't change people, this usually weirds people out. And if it does change you a lot and they're just not quite sure like what the context of everything is, this too can bring up a lot of questions.
To that end, it brings up a lot of questions. What I think is a really nice activity. I think activity is the right word, but a nice activity. And maybe this is done ahead of time. Maybe it's done, after we'll say just kind of this initial like conversation is to co-create if you're able to, whether that's with your kids or at least with your partner, maybe with your financial advisor, co-create like a map for, sharing this information and to what extent. So I've done this actually with a few clients where they have been uneasy about sharing the level of wealth that they have with their adult kids. One in particular had young adult kids and was concerned that it would influence if he were to tell his adult kids then who they chose to marry. That would come up and was concerned about maybe their future partners will just want them for money. So, what do I tell my kids in a way to where I'm sharing, but also like I want to, there's a protection piece too. And so I think what can be really nice is to build almost like a roadmap, right? For like, where do we want to get to? Again, going to like what's kind of the end result. And maybe the end result is eventually at some point we would like to share with Cam and Abby that we have $50 billion. Like that's the ultimate, and that they beyond that, like understand how that is going to be divided. They understand from their standpoint what they will be receiving, just all of the stuff from, the nitty-gritty aspect of that. Like that is the end goal, is that they fully comprehend and understand like our estate plan and how it will work upon our death. But can we build a roadmap for like how to get there? So Cam and Abs right now are 12 and 13. Like, hey, like by 25, like we want them to know the full scope of, at least at that point in time, like where things like stand. Okay, let's incrementally like work our way there, knowing that we've got more than a decade here of runway. And so maybe then like the starting point is a lot different. Maybe it's just helping them understand like, hey, when or if mom and dad pass away, there's a plan for you, right? And it's called a will, or it's called an estate plan. And there's instructions in that document for what would happen, or wherever the starting point is. Maybe it's just talking about money specifically, high level around like earnings, or about we received this money and it's going to be protected for some period of time, wherever it is. But I think that it can be really helpful to build out just this conversation roadmap, because I think it reduces anxiety on the G1, like the parents here. If we have a plan, if we kind of have a map to know like where we're going, then we can take some comfort in that we don't have to do it all at once. We don't have to put so much pressure on this first conversation. But also along the way, we can gauge our adult children's responses to that. How are they navigating it? Also, what's going on in their life too? How much can they take? So I like the idea of building a map. Have you done other, I guess, exercises, or seen other things done in terms of
I will
guiding
say
conversations?
I will say shout out to Asset Map. Like if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
a planner and you're listening to this, I think a great visual tool, because I really do think that there is some visualizing that really helps here in this particular, like, yes, it can also be timeline related, but just seeing like the money is in the trust. This is how the money will be distributed. This is how, like, sometimes just the visual manifestation of like where everything is and how everything works together can be super powerful. So there, just know that there are tools out there in financial planning. Again, if you're a person listening to this, you can try to draw it out, or again, you can find a financial planner and maybe find one that has asset map and get a picture of this, because I definitely think that can help.
Yeah. They
Yes,
have a cool feature just because this is like the therapist in me. They have what they call like relationship maps
they do.
there, which is to that end super cool and super awesome. So yeah, kudos to them for building that out. I think that visual piece is again spot on.
Yes. Alongside that, I feel like I don't want to be like a doomsday
Just
person.
do it. Just do
A
it.
lot a lot of times by the time I get involved in these types of conversations, it's because something has gone wrong. In particular, G1 has not told G2 or G3, and now they are gone, as in they died. And now there's just this pile of money that's gone to this next generation, and there's guilt, there's shame, there's fear, there's regret. And this may so simple, but I feel like I was on a plane and I was talking to a woman about what I do. And of course, this came up and she's like, well, crazy enough, sort of thing. I just had this large inheritance come to me from my estranged father. And I said, tell me about that. Like, how are you feeling? And she's like, honestly, I hate it. I wish so much that instead of just leaving me this pot of money and not even telling me that I was going to get it, that he would have talked to me, that we would have had some sort of a relationship. I will say that sometimes estranged relationships are estranged for really important reasons. Like, I'm not saying that everybody, just because there's money involved, needs to be best friends. I think, in fact, sometimes the pressure of a big inheritance can feel that there are strings attached. And that is part of like what makes it feel yucky or bad. Like in this situation, there were no strings because there was no one to pull them. He was dead. But like there was still this, what is the purpose of this money? Why was hoarding this money and not coming to see me on holiday the more important thing? What am I now? I have a life. I'm an adult. I am fine the way that I am. She was even mentioning that she was like a banker or something like this. And, she aimed that because she wanted to have financial stability. And she wasn't saying that she would have done like an abrupt life change, but she was like, I always wanted to teach. And I didn't go into teaching because teachers don't make any money. But had I maybe known that I was going to receive this millions of dollars, maybe I would have done teaching because it ultimately wouldn't have mattered in the end. Now I have my own millions and great, but like I may have made different decisions. I could have maybe had a relationship with my father. I think also people feel sometimes when money is just dropped in their lap, even if it's not a bad thing, like it can actually be a very good thing. So not totally doomsday. But if there's no discussion of the purpose, I've sat with clients before that are just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what they want me to do. I don't know if I should pay off debt. I don't know if I should take a vacation. I don't know if I should save this money for my kids. It is not clear what the giver wanted for this money, and people really carry that. They really
Mhm.
worry about like what this could mean and what am I supposed to do with it now? And I don't want to do it wrong. Even though again, like they're dead, like this does not matter. And then sometimes I think feels even heavier. And so, to that point, if you are the giver, we've been talking about, get on board with like your partner or your financial planner, don't go it alone, and even if you are a single person, talk to your best friend like before you do this. If you don't have anybody else to talk to, then set the expectations. Then, maybe do a little ask, tell, ask. Another thing to think about is just talking about the purpose. What is the purpose of this money? Not only for our life now together as a family while we have it, but potentially what this money may mean, as it outlives me, and potentially how it outlives you. And again, that along this arc of like the conversations that you have, I think that that purpose conversation is perhaps one of the most important ones to have and probably needs its own meeting. And again, I understand that some things might need to get worked out. Again, if this is like a really new windfall or something like that, and we don't have everything worked out, what exactly is the purpose of this meeting or this money may not be figured out yet. But that is a super important thing to go on the timeline of conversations to have. What is the purpose of this for us? What is the purpose of this for our family? What is the purpose of this for surviving generations? And for that to be a standing conversation that people can then participate in.
Yeah, I like that. That definitely should be on that map of conversations is the expectation because you're right. And I've seen that before too. Like after the parent or parents like have like passed and then there's a lot of emotions, right? A lot of emotions around that. And those are very common ones, right? I still want to honor like my parent or parents or the giver, even if the relationship wasn't, whether it was non existent or not, there's a pressure there. That's understandable too. So being able to have that kind of expectation conversation ahead of time will hopefully at least alleviate or reduce any of that pressure, guilt, or wonder, curiosity, fear, all of that after the giver has passed. I do want to kind of lastly touch on because you've talked about on like the receiver here and like the emotions there. One of the things that I would imagine that you see this as well is on the parent side. I think it gets labeled as control, having control or wanting control of decisions or like behavior. So, let me back up a little bit. When parents start to think about, do I want to share this information? Do I want to share about this windfall, what our kids will, likely receive or what we've received? Do I want to share that? What do I share? How much do I share? Should I be honest with them? all of these questions, I think sometimes get put up under like this label of control that parents want to have control. And that letting, if I share this, there's, this
Have less control.
concern. I will have less control because once the information is out, like you can't put it back in the box. And so I just want to speak to that. I don't know if I would say that it's so much based on control, but fears, that there are just certain fears that come up for parents, understandably so, when it comes to sharing about windfalls with their adult children. And I think it's important to name that. Sometimes those fears come out as a lot of what ifs. What if my child see this and it demotivates them for building their own wealth, or taking care of themselves? What if like their partner, people just marry them for their money, right? Like I was talking about earlier, will they still be grateful? Will they depend on us for everything? Will they spend it and use it responsibly? There's worry and fear around their adult child's behavior that I think is completely normal. There's also fears around just uncertainty in the future. I've seen this come up, especially for business owners where they have earned, like they've worked really hard and they've earned like that money. Listen, you and I building like beyond the plan and we go to sell it for like $100 billion, like you and I think would both feel like we've put blood, sweat,
Blood,
tears,
sweat,
like
and tears, literally.
and tears into this, right? And so I think sometimes for these parents, like there is this like, here is a story of how this money like came to
Yeah.
be, right? And there's a lot wrapped up into that. And there can be a fear of if when this money, transitions to, our adult children, like will they still honor that story? And, or will the story change completely? And so I just want to one, like validate, I think those fears. I think they can come out as trying to control
It looks
this.
like that a lot of times. Yeah.
It definitely looks like that, but I would probably name it as fear, and I think that that's important to recognize. I think it's important to own, and create, whether this is with your financial advisor, whether this is with a financial therapist, or just even between you and your spouse. You can do that as well, but try to at least kind of figure out, okay, like how do we work with these fears? How do we, accept them for what they are, but then figure out like what is this going to look like, and are we going to let the fear get in the way of us figuring out a plan, or a roadmap for being able to do or get done or share with our adult kids the thing that we need to share.
So as you're talking about this, it's making me think about hope and cope. I think it's always better to start these conversations, even though we know that there are fears. Like that's a normal thing. But people also have a lot of hopes. Like the counter oftentimes to the fear is the hope. My fear is that they are just going to become a crazy spendthrift and be a total nut and live their life in Vegas. But my hope is that they become a profitable, useful person in society and live near me. Okay. So like the hope and the fear are reflections of each other. And I think if you go into a conversation and you're like, okay, I'm going to talk about or imagine the worst possible scenario, then you're going to be planning from a place of protection, which is not bad. It's certainly, we consider this, but also planning from a place of prosperity allows different things to come in. And so while I believe that all people need to make time for the fear, if you were to make a column of all the things that you were fearful of, and then you were to rewrite them as statements of hope, and now you were to go to your adult children and you were to say, look, it is a very real fear that this money will change your life trajectory. It is my greatest hope that it is going to change your life trajectory in this positive way. Let's talk about what that might look like. And then the cope part, like I back to like hope and cope, not just fear and hope, is that like, okay, then what is the path to get there?
Yeah.
Now that we've told them that, how can they be an active participant in that? What are the things that they need to do? Again, especially depending on the level of wealth that we're talking about. Maybe you decided to have it or some sort of donor fund
Donor
that
advised fund.
yes, donor, thank you. Like for the family. And so you're like, this is what's important to us. We care about this as a family. And there can be real benefits to just learning about finances, learning about budgets, because the charitable institution still has a budget. Even though you may not in your personal life, you are going to have to work within a budget, participating in this charity. You're going to be talking about money in an active and open way with your family members, maybe related to the charity. If it's not about the charity and it's more so about just family within the family, and if we go back to this idea of a purpose, I think sometimes G1 is more able to release control to G2 or G3 when, if the purpose is there and people can articulate, G2 and G3, how they are going to be a part of that purpose. It may not be the way that you did it, but if they can articulate how they want to be a part of that purpose, then again, I think that that sets up a different expectation. That sets up a different line of conversation versus it being yes and no, and this just being well, we're going to support that, we won't support that, and this behavior is okay but this behavior is not. There is a way to talk to people to, again, be able to express your fear, because those are real things we need to be able to share. Emotions are multidimensional, but then also leading with the hope that this is actually what I dream for you. Let's talk about what that looks like and how you see that. I think that this offers, yeah, a way to honor the fear that we have as parents, which is, again, like you said, a totally normal thing, but then not be so guided only or exclusively by the fear, that we can actually lean into that place of prosperity, the place of safety, the place of hope, open communication, which are all key to actually getting buy-in and engagement from the lower generations that are going to be using this money.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a fantastic way for us to wrap things up too, right? Just from a place of hope, right? Leaning into that and thinking thoughtfully, right, about what is your hope there. It's a fun exercise. In the vein of hope, Meg and I hope that this has been helpful for you, whether you're an advisor, whether you're a client listening. We hope that this conversation has been helpful for you, talking about, if there is a windfall that you've received, how do I structure this conversation? Like, where do I begin? So, going back to the beginning, identifying, okay, where do we want the end result to be? How do we want to be feeling when we leave that conversation? Even within it, the framework, the ATA framework, ask, tell, ask framework. So, how to structure the conversation. And then just some other important points here around creating kind of a roadmap for these conversations, thinking about hope. What, as a parent, like, what do you hope for? And being able to communicate that effectively. So, lots of great content here that we've run through. We hope that it's been helpful, that it's been valuable to you. If you would like more conversations like this, if you would like more, Meg and Ashley, if you'd like more conversations like this, feel free to check us out, Meg, on Less Lonely Money on her Substack there. You can also check out the Planning and Beyond podcast for financial advisors. But you can also follow our YouTube channel here at Beyond the Plan Solutions, where we post conversations like this on a monthly basis, I would say is probably the rhythm that we're kind of rolling with now, but on a monthly basis. Or if you'd like to explore just what this can look like within your practice, feel free to reach out to us because we love talking about
You're
conversation
here,
design.
work with us. Yeah.
Come work with us. We would love, love to be a part of your team. We'd love to have you in our community. We would love to have thoughtful conversations like this around communication design or other areas within your business that maybe a little bit of behavioral finance, financial psychology thinking kind of elevate you to the next level. So reach out to us. Until next time, we wish all of you well. Thank you for joining.
Bye.